Yeah, I mean, here's the interesting thing about an arson. Like, if you're going to kill somebody, you've got to get close to them. You've got to, come up to them. Even if you're going to shoot them, you've got to get fairly close. The thing with a serial arson is, much of them, arson's a coward's crime because you can set it and run away and wait for it to happen. So these aren't guys who are necessarily going to, be the guy that's going to get up in your face. They tend to be more, withdrawn about things because they'd rather do their thing and step back and watch it. That was certainly the case of most of the people I've dealt with who were serial arsonists. Most of them were kind of mousy people who, I got to tell you, I think most of them wanted to get caught eventually, and they were enjoying it. I know the guy that did this fire, he would tell me that he used to watch me on TV, pulling out my hair, and you can see it already happened, working on the case. And, and when we got him and we started talking to him about it, I wouldn't say he was bragging about it. It was more like, yeah, I did it, and here's how I did it. And, it just wasn't, like a guy who was, trying to do it because he's a contract arsonist. Because you can also make the argument the contract guy is a serial guy because he's doing arsons for profit. He's hired out and he's burning things. He's doing multiple fires.
Right.
But technically he's a serial guy, but his motivation is usually money. I can't say that because they are getting money, they're not also enjoying it, but their motivation clearly isn't so much psychological, it is financial.
Right.
But it's not cut and dry. I think there could be a lot more studies done on it. I'd like to see that. But I've seen a lot of the guys that we've done, like this guy, Bebic, that we arrested this. I mean, one of the things when we got the profile and they were telling us about the ties to, he had a sex crime in his past. And the case didn't go anywhere, but we were able to find it. And they tend to be lower socioeconomic. They tend to have disheveled appearances, and we were waiting for him to pick him up. I mean, the last fire that he did was to Temple Ohab Zedek, and you see Rabbi Reiner there. I don't know if Rabbi Reiner's still alive, but he did a minor fire there, and most of these fires that he had there were minor fires. But there was a can in the school around the corner where if you made a phone call, you'd put a quarter in, and he was in there and he was begging them for money, and he stole the can. And when the rabbi started talking about this crazy guy with a disheveled appearance, and they knew his name because they would write him checks.
Right.
Actually writing him checks to kind of, hey. So when we went to the bank, hey, what's going on with the checks? And we saw that he was cashing them on a welfare card, and all the women in the bank were like, oh, crazy Bebic, messed up teeth, messed up hair, always looks like disheveled. So now you're like, okay, disheveled appearance. He's on welfare. He's probably lower socioeconomic. Then you run his BCI and you see the sex crime in his past. You're like, okay, we got to go talk to Brian.
Yeah. Let me ask you something about the 93 World Trade Center bombing. Now, it's famous that the bombers rented a U-Haul, and they were allowed to somehow park the U-Haul in the garage in the basement of the World Trade Center. What type of bomb was that?
A big one.
Obviously,
they took a van and they made something called Witch's Brew, which is basically like ammonium nitrate. And I don't want to talk too much about how it was made because I certainly don't want to kind of give an instructional on how to make a bomb. But
I think people can pull up the directions on the internet to do that.
You know what? Let them. I mean, it's funny when I do lectures on this, I show all the places online that you can get this, and it's usually some movies where they tell you how to do it, or some TV shows. And there's been a couple of major newspapers that have put things in there. The how he does it, and they give instructions. I just don't want to contribute to that, but I mean, they loaded the back of the van up. They basically took a long fuse, lit it, and then it went up.
That did it did like a 2-story hole in the ground too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's amazing, but like when a bomb goes out, it keeps spreading. It's taking everything in its path, and you know, being in a parking lot, there is a lot of open spaces. You have places some of that energy, and it's an event, but I mean, it's still, they put it close to the walls, and I think they wanted to knock the building down, but when you watch demolitions of buildings, they rig the charges so that the building falls on itself.
Right.
Just can't throw a bomb in and knock it down. We've even seen that with gas explosions with Con Ed and things. I mean, sometimes you get a small enough building, it'll take the building down, but I mean, for the most part, you've got to plan a detonation to knock it down. It just doesn't happen like that.
Now, is there any truth to the rumor that I heard? I may have heard this at a training course that the bomber went back to U-Haul to get his deposit back, and that was one of the ways he got caught.
Yeah, you actually had, it wasn't one bomber, it was a team of guys, and two of them went back to, believe it or not, they went back to New Jersey to get the deposit on the rental of the van. They reported it stolen, and
it's amazing, right?
And they basically told the guys,
like, where is the van? Oh, you want the deposit back? Where's the van?
you think about all the money and time they put into this, and let's go back for the van. It's
is that one of the ways that they got caught?
Yeah, I mean, it was what had happened was when the different police agencies put together and they found the VIN for the van, they knew what the van was. Were able to trace it back, and they said, all right, this van belongs to this. I don't want to say the commercial name of the company, but the rental company.
Right.
When we found out where it was, we reached out to them, and when the guys called up and said they were coming back for their deposit, they were like, hey, you want those guys? They're coming by. And
that's great. I mean, you can't make stuff up, that the stupidity of that. No one would ever believe that unless it was true.
What's funny? I was doing a lecture last year in the Catskills to an audience, and it was really about the last bombing, and when I talked about the '93 bombing, people like '93 bombing, and it's funny how it was the first terrorist attack on the country. People died, and no one seems to care about it. I mean, I'm glad when I went to the World Trade Center Memorial, they actually had a section carved out for the people that died. I'm glad they actually made that distinction.
Right.
It just. I mean, it certainly changed everybody's lives in the country and the city. It certainly changed mine. I mean, one day I'm running around crack houses in East New York, and now I'm down there. And again, I had not been in the squad more than a couple of months when this happened. I'd never worked on anything like this. I always said, yeah, I was there. Yeah, I made the coffee. I learned a lot by, watching, certainly my fellow detectives in Arson and Explosion, but also the guys in TARU, the Bomb Squad, ESU. But it was also, it was the FBI show because it was terrorism.
Right.
And the members of the ATF National Response Team, and just a tremendous experience. I mean, I'll.
Well, what was your experience in your Arson Explosion career with working with the FBI? Was it a positive experience, or?
I never really had a problem with the, if you understand the way the game is played, it's like, certain things they get. It's a terrorism case, it's theirs. And you know what? That's the way it is. And if you understand that, then when they come in and they take over a case, you realize this is their jurisdiction. This is their ball game. And we worked much closer with ATF, because ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, they were the ones that were charged with bombing investigations. They were also charged by President Clinton with doing all the church fires, and that kind of became my forte in the unit, was doing a lot of the fires to religious institutions. And so I worked a lot with ATF, some wonderful guys, Jerry Raffa, Chris Bean, Stan Wojcik, Bruce Laundis. I mean, I'm John Leahy. There's so many I could mention, and they were all wonderful guys to work with, very helpful, helped us get training. Sometimes they help you by just the feds would pay the overtime on something that was going on, which is always a problem. They get you cars, they get you training. We had to go somewhere and I had to go to interview some people on an arson bombing case in Florida. Yeah, don't worry, we'll pay for it. We'll pay for the hotel. We'll pay for it. And when you still have the job because everything has a dollar value to it. Oh, who's going to pay for this? Well,
right.
going to pay for it.
It's so when you think about it, it seems so like Mickey Mouse that they're nickel and diming like that with the budget on the NYPD, because and some of these cases are very important cases. But you're right, they have this budget and they don't want to pay to send people to other states. The FBI has international jurisdiction. I mean, they could send an agent to England, to Israel, to anywhere in the whole world, and not bat an eye. But local police or even the NYPD doesn't have this huge travel budget, or when they do, they don't want to spend the money. So it becomes a problem,
Yeah, and too, I mean, certainly there's a monetary issue to it, but there's also the fact that jurisdictionally, I mean, the feds can go anywhere in the country, and they have just as much authority in New York City as they do in Okefenokee somewhere, and.
Right. But that's why they've deputized NYPD detectives, sergeants.
Yeah, we were all deputized. We were all.
Right. So you're a federal agent, so you can go anywhere too.
Go anywhere, carry our guns anywhere. I mean, even after 9/11, when we were traveling, I'm carrying my gun on the plane, and I thought it'd be a problem. The captain's like, "Nope, we've got cops and agents on with guns. Great." But they bring a lot of resources, and like I said, I mean, with ATF, I had to go to their people for profiling. It was funny though, when I talked to them, then they were giving me ideas about what to look for in the Rockaways, with the lower socioeconomic and the homeless. And, a lot of times, they're down south giving us this information. I'm like, they don't know what the Rockaways is like. They don't know, 116th Street has a ton of SROs and homeless people. And,
right.
At the time I'm like, well, that's not really going to help me, narrow my suspects down or help me identify. You take the information, you put it in your pocket, and you know what? It ended up being valuable, when the suspect came up. Now all that information was invaluable, and it doesn't help you arrest him necessarily, but it certainly lets you know you're on the right trail. This is the guy. All right, we've got to talk to this guy. We got to account for his time.
Sure.
And, they were great too about when we were having all the fires, they gave us a lot of pole cameras and cameras to set up in the area to try to catch the guy. We never got him on the cameras, but I mean, just being able to, give us those kind of resources. And, I can't say
you spoke about
wonderful to work with.
Yeah. You spoke about how federal agents don't have a good handle on the specific community you mentioned, Far Rockaway. And that's why it's such a great idea that we have these joint task forces where they put NYPD cops, detectives, working with the FBI and working with the ATF, because they can be sort of the eyes and the ears for those federal agencies and sort of show them the ropes in the specific areas of the city that they just may not have the experience in working in,
And you know what it is? I mean, where we can make arrests without a warrant, under certain circumstances with probable cause, the feds tend to make all their arrests, with very few exceptions, through a warrant, so if, there's things that we can do, street encounters, how we handle things. It's just, it's also when you have them and you bring them in and you start questioning people and, here's my friend, the federal agent. And if you lie to him, that's a problem.
Right.
And, so there's, you have to be able to work in tandem and work with each other in a successful way. And you got to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And there's a lot of great task forces like the Joint Terrorist Task Force, the Joint Arson Task Force that was part of Arson and Explosion. But, I've always felt like probably the most abused word in law enforcement is task force because, my favorite example is the Rockaway case that we just profiled where, when fires were happening, it was all, we were, the task force was us and Bias and the precinct detectives and, ATF and the Nassau marshals and the cops in Long Beach, but when the things were happening all the time, it was myself and the detective, great detective Jeffrey Gardner from Bias, who was, doing most of the work, and, we couldn't get overtime. I mean, I got to tell you, so many of the nights I was working on the case, I ended up working on it alone, and I worked on it in my own time because the job wouldn't give overtime. As a matter of fact,
Don't tell me that. I was the SBA delegate. As soon as there's no overtime, I leave.
Yeah,
believe me, the city has the money. They have the money.
I know they have it.
Yeah, so it's like, don't tell me that you're not going to pay me. It's crazy.
And, it was funny because even when I caught the guy, they, without getting too much into it, I basically, was running the case and running the investigation. I had a lot of help from great detectives like Bob DeLeon from the 100th Squad. And, we knew the guy. He was actually a Brooklyn guy. And we went to go get him. And, they weren't authorizing the overtime and they sent me home. And I'm like pleading, like, are you kidding me? We're finally here and we're going to, and I was sitting home and I was just I just started dating my wife. And, I said, you know what? And I actually went and I caught him off duty, and brought him in.
Wow.
That's why I'm not in my, when I'm doing the walk, I'm not in bureau clothes because A&E was a big bureau clothes guy. Because when I went and got him, I went and I got him brought him back. And then once I had him back at the precinct, all of a sudden, no, you're on duty. And, myself and, I was fortunate enough to have a great sergeant like John Santos and, came out and, thank God for John Santos. I mean, we'd argue all the time, but it was great to have that guy grabbing you back. I'm like, all right, kid, relax.
That's what the boss's job is.
The
boss's job is to protect you from yourself.
Absolutely. And John, if you're watching, thank you. You protected me myself plenty of times.
It took me
Benzalillo, my other sergeant.
It took me years to realize that. I got promoted very early in my career. I had 4 years and 10 months on the job. I made sergeant. And I didn't understand until years later that my job was to protect cops and detectives from themselves. It took me a few years to figure that out, Once I did, it was like, hey, it's almost like I'm doing this for your good, not for mine,
Sorry, I'm plugging it in. I'm running out of power there. Here we go.
Oh.
Give me 1 sec. 1 sec.
The Arson Explosion guy doesn't have enough power, not enough juice. Something seems
there we go.
A little weird about that. But so where this career as an Arson Explosion detective now led to your second career as the owner of a private investigative firm, right?
Well, it's fun. I really didn't think I was going to continue with fires. It was funny. I kind of fell into A&E. There's certain guys that, were volunteer firemen. They're very into the fire. Man, I'm a guy. I grew up in the city. I'm from Bay Ridge. And it was a thing where, they had some openings and like, you want to go do this? And at the time they had a case where they were buying grenades. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. An extension of kind of a buy and bust that I was doing in narcotics. And when I joined, it really wasn't a forensic squad. Like I said earlier in the interview, we would call the fire marshals in the morning. They would fax over cases that we would catch. And later on, it became, more like it is today. It's certainly more of a crime scene or a forensic type of a squad. But, it's one of those things where if you're going to work this in the private sector, I mean, you're either going to go work for a company that is doing insurance cases, or you can do defense work and when I say defense work, it's certainly criminal defense work, which is part of my practice, but, it's also insurance defense where a lot of these insurance companies are short sheeting people on some fire claims. And, you'd be surprised when you get some inexperienced guy doing the case and they say it's an arson. I won't mention the detective's name, but I had a very well-known detective in the department who, him and his wife had a house that was a rental property that burned, and the guy working the case for the insurance company was saying it was an arson, and I walked him through the scene and I said, no, look, and he said, this is why it's not. And you know, they were looking at him, because a lot of red flags were going up. You know, they were in the rears, they hadn't had tenants in a while, they weren't making money. You know, the house was becoming a burden on them financially. And that's certainly one of the many things that you want to look for, you know, when you see a fire, you know, are these people not being able to handle the car payment, the house payment, the mortgage? Right. But, you know, he was so blinded by that. He was like, no, this is why, and this is why. And I'm like, no, come here, see this, see that? And, you know, we were able to convince them that it was an accidental fire, it was an electrical fire, and they paid his claim. And I mean, you can imagine, you know, what would have happened to this guy if they, you know, because, you know, the minute that happens, they're going to call the job, and they're going to drop a departmental case on him about this. Is
right, sure.
Creating a fraud. So, you know, I was very proud that I was able to protect him from that. But, you know, you'd be surprised how many people get insurance claims where, you know, the companies don't want to pay it, or they're arguing about whose responsibility it is. You know, you'll have a building that burns, and you'll have an arson investigator coming in for the building owner, and you'll have another arson investigator coming in for the guy that rents the place, and another guy coming in for the guy that got hurt in the fire who's just in the place at the time. You know, so you can have one fire case where you'll have multiple investigators on it, and because they're all covering multiple people's interests, and what might not be the building owner's interest because maybe he didn't maintain the building properly, and now I'm the tenant and I'm saying, well, because he didn't do that, I want to go after his insurance, and it's called subrogation. Or they're all looking to, you know, who can we blame for this, you know? And you know,
I think that's why when someone sues, they sue everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I know I do.
Well, you know, that's why people always want to sue the city, because they have the deepest pockets, right?
Oh, absolutely. But you know, you'd be some of these insurance companies are, you know, they've got deeper pockets than people would probably imagine. You know, it's I'm not an anti-insurance company, but you know, I'll tell you this. I mean, when I was in A&E, I can't think of too many times where I had commercial fires where the private guy wasn't calling to say, is there any way we can think that we're looking at the insured? You know, and if we had reason to think that that was the case, and we're able to point them in that direction, you know, they'd be over the moon, because they thought eventually we were going to lock the guy up. And but you know, sometimes that bites them in the ass too. We've had cases where, you know, they were so quick to pay people. Like we had this the Tribeca torch. This guy was setting fires in down by the Federal Plaza, and one of the fires ended up being a homicide to a fire Lieutenant Leonard. And when we made the arrest, after about a week, you know, big press conference at Giuliani, and you know, a lot of accolades, a lot of, you know, great jobs, but
a lot of attaboys.
What's that?
A lot of attaboys.
A lot of attaboys. But I mean, you know, we were just happy to get the guy, especially the fire lieutenant died after we already had the guy arrested. So, you know, obviously the charges were upgraded and turned over to the detective squad in the first precinct. But